Hey there, Spencer here with Builder Funnel, and it's that time of year we're reflecting back and looking ahead to the new year with ambition, optimism, and excitement. I want to make sure we build on that excitement, but we also see it through to execution. So in this video, we're going to talk about auditing last year's marketing plan and your marketing success there, and looking ahead to next year's. All right, so you're working on next year's marketing plan. Where do you start? It's really easy to get caught up in the tactics, things like video and Instagram. Those are the really hot topics right now. Before we get too far down the path and looking into next year, let's take a look back at last year and see what we can learn. So there's going to be two things that we want to look at. And the first one is hard metrics, and the second one is going to be soft metrics or branding. So let's go ahead and jump in and look at item number one, which is hard metrics. So I'm a big numbers person, and today with all the tools and technology, it's really easy to track what's going on with your marketing. So let's take a look at that. All right, so the first place we want to look is your CRM. And so what we want to do is see where your customers came from. Was it the website? Was it social media? Was it model homes or signage? So let's figure out where those original customers came from. What was the original source? Now, while you're doing this step, make sure to total revenue from each source as well. So we want to know number of new customers as well as the revenue per customer. Okay, once you've got those two things, the next thing we want to evaluate is your marketing spend for each one of those channels. So how much did you spend on your website? How much on signage, etc. From there, it's just some quick math. So let's say you spent $60,000 on your website, and let's say that produced 10 customers for an average home sale price of $450,000. So you've got $4.5 million in sales. That equates to a 1.3% marketing spend on that revenue. Next, you'll want to take that step and again, run the math for each of your marketing channels. So figure out how many customers, what the total revenue was, and what your marketing expense was, and then see what those percentages shake out to be. So here's a quick example of what this might look like after you've done the math and figured out where you're spending on each one of those channels. So if you're using some really good marketing software or good sales software, you should be able to track this, as well as even getting a little bit more granular and tracking down to the campaign level. So maybe you had a specific open house or a model home tour on a specific weekend, and you could actually track it down to that level. That's a little bit more advanced, but it is a good step to take if you have that data. So once we've gone through all of this, the entire point is that we want to see, are there any channels that you can exploit going into next year? So maybe the website produced at a really good rate. You know, the amount you spent versus the amount you generated in revenue was a percentage that you're really happy with. So let's double down on those channels going into next year. Maybe there were some channels that were pretty weak, and you might want to take away some dollars from those channels and reallocate them somewhere else. So as an example, sometimes events can be a big money drain as well as a time investment for you and your team. So maybe you want to scale back what you did with events this year and again, put those dollars towards a channel that's performing really well. All right, I know this is a lot, but again, the main takeaway here is that you want to see what channels were working really well, what channels suffered and were poor performers, and then this gives you a good framework for looking ahead and making those adjustments going into the next year. All right, so let's look at item number two, which is the soft metrics and branding. So you may have some things like signage and community sponsorships that maybe don't produce revenue at the level that some of your other channels do, but they're something good that you're doing in the community, or it's part of a long-term branding play. So again, some of these you may look at as a judgment call with you and your team, and so you may not want to cut back on those even if from just a math perspective they didn't make sense this year, because again, there could be a long-term play there, or it's just something that's in your company's DNA, you like to give back to the community. So you have to take those things into consideration. That's why we call them soft metrics. Now that we've taken a look back, let's kind of put our eyes up and look at, are there any trends that we might want to implement for next year? What's happening in the marketplace, and do we need to make any of those adjustments? Are there any new digital channels that are maybe picking up steam? Instagram is one of those channels that didn't exist several years ago. House was a new channel at one point. So there may be some of those things that are starting to pop up that you may want to get involved with. We also want to look at the buying process. So the way people shop and buy is very different today than it was 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. So again, are there some major shifts going on in the way people research and buy homes? And if so, we may want to adapt the strategy from there. And lastly, take a look at some competitors and talk to your peers around the country. What are they doing? Maybe they're doing some things that are different. Maybe the market's a little bit different and you could be on the cutting edge by implementing something new that people are doing maybe on the coasts if you're inland or vice versa. So you can learn a lot from looking at competitors as well as peers. I always like to say that marketing is part art and part science. So I love the numbers and that's the science part. So we went through the math, but there's also the art part and the creative. So don't forget about those when you're making your decisions. It can't be all science and all data. So that's why it's okay to test and experiment. In marketing, we have to do that. So maybe you want to pick one thing that you'll test this year. Maybe it'll flop, but that's okay as long as you look back and see what did you learn from that experience, and then you can do another test. So take as many things as you can that are working well, but then throw in some tests as well. All right, thanks so much for watching. I hope this helps you with your next year's marketing plan. And again, for more videos like this one, go ahead and subscribe to Builder Funnel TV.